Today, we're diving deep, really deep, into a story that's been buried for thousands of years. A story that, if it's true, could change everything we think we know about where we come from. You ready? Let's do this.
Okay, so let's just start with a really provocative question, one that kind of throws a wrench into everything we learned in history class. What if? What if civilization didn't just slowly evolve, crawling out of the muck over millennia? What if we got a push, a major leg up from someone, or maybe something else?
So where does this story even begin? We have to go back to ancient Mesopotamia, around 4500 BC. And what we find there is, well, it's a huge historical puzzle. The Sumerians. This civilization just appears. It's like they burst onto the scene fully formed in all their glory. They've got advanced writing, they've got complex math, they're mapping the stars. They even had the first laws protecting human rights, out of nowhere.
So you gotta ask, right? How is that even possible? This kind of sudden leap forward just doesn't make sense from a historical perspective. It's like they skipped the first 10 chapters of the textbook and started right in the middle with all the answers. How?
Well, what's so wild is that the Sumerians actually told us how. They left behind thousands of clay tablets, and on those tablets, they wrote it all down. They said their knowledge, their entire civilization, was a gift from a group of powerful beings they called the Anunnaki. And look, the name Anunnaki isn't just some generic word for gods. Oh no, it's way more specific. If you break it down, An means heaven, Ki means earth. So the name literally translates to something like those of royal bloodline from the heavens, or even more directly, those who from heaven to earth came. Think about that for a second.
Okay, so this is where things get really, really strange. We're about to move past history and into territory that sounds a lot more like science fiction. Because when you look at their creation stories, like the famous Atrahasis epic, they don't read like myths at all. They read like lab notes, like a report from a genetic engineering experiment.
So check this out. The tablets lay out this whole sequence of events. First, there's a rebellion. A group of, let's call them junior gods, called the Ijiji, they go on strike. They're tired of doing all the hard labor. And yeah, this is basically the first recorded labor strike in history. So to solve this problem, a lead scientist, a god named Enki, he has this crazy idea. He says, let's just create a worker to do the job for us. The tablets then talk about trial and error, a bunch of failed attempts, until, boom, they finally get it right. And the text actually says, "Behold, it is a man." Think about that. With those words etched into clay thousands of years ago, a whole new species is announced. According to them, this wasn't evolution taking its slow, sweet time. Nope, this was a deliberate act of engineering, an act of creation. And they even had a name for this new being, the Lulu Amalu. It means something like the mixed worker. And the texts get super specific. They say this worker was a hybrid, made by mixing the blood or essence of the gods with the clay of the earth. Now, a lot of people read that today and think, wait a minute, are they talking about mixing their DNA with the DNA of a hominid that was already here? So let's just let that sink in. The big takeaway here, according to the Sumerians' own history, is just mind-blowing. Humanity wasn't created to be the masters of the planet. We weren't the grand finale of evolution. We were engineered for a job. We were made to be a slave race for the gods.
Okay, but here's where it gets even crazier. You'd think a story this wild would just be a one-off, right? A weird little myth from one culture. But it's not. This story seems to be the original blueprint. You can find echoes of it everywhere, especially in texts that are much more familiar to us.
Just look at the parallels here. Let's take the Great Flood story. Everyone knows the story of Noah, right? Well, in the Sumerian Atrahasis epic, which is way older, a hero named Utnapishtim is warned by a god to build a giant boat because the gods are going to flood the earth. Why? Because humans were being too loud. Fast forward a couple thousand years, and in the book of Genesis, Noah is told to build an ark to survive a flood sent because humanity was corrupt. A hero warned by a god, a command to build a big boat, surviving a global flood, the key points are almost identical.
But it's not just the myths that line up. These incredible claims are also carved right into what the Sumerians considered their official history books. I'm talking about their actual king lists.
So there's a real artifact, you can go see it, called the Sumerian King List. And the things it says are just, they defy belief.
It lists a whole line of kings who ruled before that great flood we just talked about, and their reigns, we're not talking 40 or 50 years. We're talking thousands of years.
Each? Just look at this number, 28,800 years. That's not a typo. That's the recorded reign of just one king, the very first one, Alulim. And the next king on the list? He ruled for 36,000 years. I mean, come on, these are obviously not normal human lifespans.
So what gives? How do you explain these impossible numbers? Well, the Sumerians did. They believed these first kings weren't entirely human. They were part god, part human, direct descendants of the Anunnaki. And this single idea, that royalty has a divine connection, that they are chosen by the gods, that idea didn't die in Sumer. It became the divine right of kings that ruled Europe for centuries.
So, the story goes, we were created, we served our purpose, and eventually we were given the right to rule ourselves. But then what? What happened to the Anunnaki? Did they just leave? And if they did, what did they leave behind?
All right, so let's just pull all this together for a second. The oldest records we have seem to be telling us that celestial beings, the Anunnaki, genetically engineered humanity to be a worker race. That their core stories, like the Great Flood, are the original versions of stories that appear in the Bible millennia later. And that their official king lists record rulers who lived for tens of thousands of years, setting up this idea of a divine right to rule. It's a lot.
And all of that brings us to the big question, the one that really lingers. The texts are pretty clear about how the Anunnaki got here, but they're kind of quiet about how they left. So if the Anunnaki did leave, is their legacy still with us? Is it possible that their influence didn't just end back then? Could it still be here right now, quietly shaping our world from the shadows?